Hey, you're listening to the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast extension of the nonprofit that educates and engages individuals on mental health awareness through pop culture. I'm Black Nerd Magic, and on this episode, we are talking about 2020's Charm City Kings. I hope you enjoy.
I believe in giving credit where credit is due, and one of the things that have brought our guests for this episode to us are the wonderful ladies over at The Ghouls Next Door. If you guys have not checked out their podcast, what are you doing with your life? But if you guys haven't checked out the podcasts of our guests, what are you doing even more with your life? From the show, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, the micheaux-mission. I butchered that. I'm so sorry. Len-webb and Vincent-Williams.
That's our side podcast about tires.
Yeah. It's cool, man. I suck at pronouncing names. I'm so sorry.
We ride along on every tire that's ever been made.
Right. We also would have accepted restaurant reviews.
All right.
No, what's up? How you doing? My name is Len, a.k.a. the Bat-Tribble, and that is my partner, Vincent-Williams, and we are the men of the Micheaux-mission, 2 men, 1 podcast, every black film ever made. We get together every week and review every black film that's ever been made.
That is the goal.
All right, so I have to ask this first off, what is the best movie that you guys have discovered on your journey?
Oh.
Well, that's a tricky word. So by discover, do you mean like the best film that we hadn't seen before that we now have watched?
Right, exactly.
Or do you mean just simply what we consider the best film so far that we've reviewed?
I would say the latter, but if you guys would like to throw in some Discovery titles in there, I would love for our listeners to hear those.
Well, I'll start. I'm always going to go with Daughters of the Dust by Julie Dash. Maybe is if I had to choose a film, that is the best film we've reviewed. I think that's a nice, easy, non-controversial choice. And as far as Discovery, there's a film called Nothing But a Man.
Oh yeah,
that I think is fantastic.
From the 60s.
From the 60s, and I'm so thankful that the podcast brought me to. So those are my answers.
Well, Nothing But a Man is definitely a good choice, Vince, especially considering that it is from the 60s, and it's a film that a lot of people slept on. Even though when we reviewed it, a lot of our fans was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I did that movie! Oh my God, I love that movie." Another movie from the 60s along those same lines is Uptight, which was a very slept on film. Wow, the wind's picking up over here in Philadelphia. I don't know if that's catching on your microphones there. I'm sorry. I'm giving you that little edit point there. But I would say the best film that we reviewed so far, to me, is a film that I've only come across over the last 10 years, but it's already made its way into the list of the top 5 favorite films of mine of all time, and that is Pariah.
That's a good one.
The original, the first debut film from writer-director D. Rez, which talks about a young lady coming to grips with her sexuality, as well as dealing with how that affects all of those in her orbit, from her friends to her family, and even more detrimentally to her relationship with her parents. It is a stunning film. It is funny. It is heartbreaking. It is dramatic. It is tense. It is lyrical. It is all the things that I love about black films.
Now, what is the criteria for you guys when you guys are kind of mapping out the films that you guys want to cover? Because, just kind of looking at some of your earlier catalog, you guys go from, 1974's Uptown Saturday Night to the slept-on masterpiece of Straight Outta Compton. And then I'm gonna.
You obviously didn't hear that review.
I have not heard it yet. I love that movie. So, but then you guys go to 1994's Fresh, and then go back to 2015. So, what is kind of the criteria that you guys go about choosing episodes?
Well, we have seen months. So we have, a month like Octavia named after Octavia Butler. And in April, we do science fiction films. Or in February, we've been doing Westerns for the past couple of years. And October, appropriately enough, we do horror movies. But a lot of times it really just comes down to Len and I going back and forth and choosing films.
Yeah. Vince is a huge fan of 70s black films, so you'll find that he will mine that area a lot. Doesn't mean that he doesn't jump around, but he definitely is in his bag when he's in the 70s. Whereas I like to dig into crates a little bit more, and we'll usually if we're pulling a movie from the 20s, 30s, or 40s, it is usually one that I've dug up, just because one, those films, two, don't get the critique that they deserve, and three, those are easily slept on because a lot of people think that black films began in the 60s and 70s, with the films like Uptown Saturday Night and Shaft and all of those. So
interesting. And so you guys also, at least you, Len, are involved with the black-tribbles, which is kind of how I got introduced to you through Gabe, who's one of the co-hosts of Ghouls Next Door, as we've mentioned. Tell us a little bit about that, because you guys are on hiatus, correct?
The black-tribbles, too cool to be geeks, too cute to be nerds. We are black-tribbles. We rocked out for 10 years in this podcast and internet radio and FM radio, actually, sphere. And it was a huge fun because we actually got to represent being a geek from a black or POC point of view, and we enjoyed it immensely. But after 10 years and all of us getting into different other ancillary projects, we just decided that the main show it was time to shut that down. And now we still definitely are a crew. We still definitely have a couple of projects that we're working on in the background, and some special events that we are still planning, just to keep our name out there, and just two, because we still black geeks and we still want to represent, and we still want to be part of that zeitgeist, and just being part of that conversation, and talking to our fans out there in the Tribble Nation, and getting down with them. So it was certainly been one of the biggest highlights of my professional career, and this thing that's got me started here in podcasting.
That's really awesome. So where can people find out information about both podcasts, so that we can also link it in the descriptions below?
Well, you can find out black-tribbles at black-tribbles.com, or any place on social media at black-tribbles, and the Micheaux-mission likewise, micheaux-mission.com. That's MICHEAUX on all the social medias. And if anybody is confused about that name, hey, why are we called the Micheaux-mission? I will let the originator of that name, Vincent, tell you why we are on a Micheaux-mission in particular.
Micheaux is a reference to Oscar-Micheaux, who was the multi-hyphenate creator of the early 20th century. He was a filmmaker, a novelist, a public speaker, and he really is universally acknowledged as the godfather of black film. So it's appropriate that as Len and I began our journey into talking about black film, to always acknowledge the man who started it.
That's awesome. Is there any film of his in particular that you would recommend our listeners?
The film that a lot of people shout out is Within Our Gates, which we actually did review. And if you go to our website, there actually is a specific page that's called The Name, which speaks about Oscar-Micheaux, has a link to a video, just a short video about his history, as well as links to the episodes that we did in the past where we reviewed his films, including the film Within Our Gates. And we've got more Oscar-Micheaux films dialed up in 2021. It's been actually a couple of years since we've touched on his oeuvre, as it were, but we're definitely going to be getting back to it.
All right. Well, you guys can find all of that in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this podcast. But we were talking about the HBO Max exclusive film, Charm City Kings, and what better way to talk about it than to have two Baltimore natives with myself and Vincent here talking about this. This is the first time I feel like I've ever actually said that I'm from Baltimore on the air, so this is new territory to me.
Oh, so you've been outed. This was the film that outed you.
Yeah.
This was Kalessa's pick, so Kalessa has outed me.
Yeah, I am a big fan of The Wire, so anything that involves Baltimore, I'm down to watch it. And this film just popped up on my radar last year. And, the great thing about it is that's the first-time director. And this guy is also going to be the one who's going to do Blue Beetle, the DC adaptation. Sadly, it's not going to be one that's released in theaters. It's just going to be on HBO Max like Charm City King was. But I'm excited for that. And the promise that he shows with this film, I mean, he can go leaps and bounds with his talent, this director. What is his name? I'm hoping not to mispronounce it. It is
Angel Manuel Soto.
Yes, Angel Manuel Soto. Yeah, I talked to him on Twitter. He actually liked one of my tweets when this film had came out, and I was giving it praise. So he's a good dude.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah, this film was it was actually like a film that took me by surprise when it came on. Because one, I didn't know anything about it going into it. So having it being set in Baltimore, and now I'm from Philly, but I've been to Baltimore a bunch of times. And of course, Vince being a native of Baltimore, he sings the praises all the time. And also being a huge fan of The Wire, you're watching it and you're like, I've seen these streets before. Like I'm like looking for Stringer Bell to be walking around the corner and stuff. You know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, all right, I think I'm here. But it took me by surprise. And I know Vince, we kind of have talked about this, especially over the last couple of years with Black cinema. It's just like how much you can tell. Let me put it this way. You could tell when the director and probably like the cinematographer and everybody, like the whole production, they are being very considerate that they are making a movie with people of color, because the colors, including the hues on all of the characters, just pop right off of the screen. That was the first thing that just struck me watching this film. I was like, yo, this just looks tight. It looks good. And considering that this was, even though it's an HBO Max film, it was originally made as an independent film. HBO Max, bought it, in the wake of the pandemic, so it couldn't get the release that it needed. So, considering that it was an independent film, one that shows you the democratization of movie making is complete in 2021, and two, like you said, this definitely marks Soto as a director of note here in his field of choice, because it's a beautiful looking film.
Yeah. I was just really impressed with the acting. I always say kid actors are hit and miss across the board, and this is a film that has adult actors whose work I've enjoyed a great deal. William Catlett has worked a couple of in a couple of projects with the Achilles.
Yeah.
Mostly, you know, and I've seen them. You know, William Catlett has been on Black Lightning. He's been in a couple of other things, and I like him. Tiana Paris, we are long-time fans of her work.
Yes, sir.
So for the two of them,
Chirac. Oh, sorry.
to really anchor, for the two of them to anchor this, but at the same time, these kids really carry it. Donnell Hansley as Lamont, Kesley Curtis as Swear to God,
Swear to me.
you know, and then Jaheed Ella Winston as Mouse. I thought they were really, really good. I enjoyed their work a great deal. I have to say, speaking of this being in the shadow of The Wire, you know going in that one of them isn't going to make it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it really is a testament to these actors that they breathe so much life into these characters that when the moment comes that you know is coming, it's still jarring. So yeah, I enjoyed this. I really did.
So I'm on the I'm outside of the fence. I've never actually seen The Wire.
Stop the podcast. Stop the podcast.
Classic.
Right now. You call yourself, obviously this is why you don't rep for Baltimore as hard.
I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but The Wire is a great show.
Yes.
Celeste and I have talked about it several times off air.
I've been trying to put him on game, guys. I've been putting him on game.
Ganged up on my own show. Oh no. But so like that, the ending where you do have, you know, Swear to God actually does end up dying. It caught me like off guard. I feel like one of the films we covered in this series again was Concrete Cowboy was another one, and the end to that film like just surprised the crap out of me. I mean, when we were watching it, the guest that we had for that show, Jasmine, like both of us like were so startled by that moment. And I feel like the end of this film where they decide those three characters decide that they're going to, you know, rob the convenience store. You know, it was shocking to me. Like, it's still like really startling. Like, here you have like kids that are like, you know, 14, like I like 13, 14 years old. Like, I remember when I was that age, like I wasn't like caring about that. Like, I was just, you know, I was going after girls, you know, like puberty, you know, but you look at the kind of situations, and, you know, I'm the white guy on this podcast. So like, I have to learn about, you know, the minority experience through films like Charm City and history books and podcasts like micheaux-mission, and, you know, really kind of get to listen and understand it. And so the experience of these three characters growing up and having this experience and kind of the circumstances that are surrounding Mouse, and, you know, have him losing his brother, and also his relationship with blacks, I felt like was such a compelling element to this story as well.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Yeah, it's compelling in that each of these characters, these three best friends, they are very complex. I mean, Lamont, in a bad film, they would just have Lamont just be the bad guy, just doing all these bad things and trying to drag Winston and swear to God down with him, into this life of crime and everything. But we see that Lamont is still innocent. I mean, there's a scene where these guys are going to the store and getting candy, and they're talking about girls and which girls they want to give for the summer. I mean, just those little touches like that lets you know that these people, that on the outside, society looks at them and says that they're undeserving, that they're just going to grow to be super predators, like they're prone to violence. Like, no, there's people, there are beautiful people in this environment. There's people who are just trying to survive, work a job, trying to live every day, trying to make happiness out of something. Because oftentimes in these environments, all you are seeing is trauma all around you. All you're seeing is dysfunction. All you're seeing is death. All you're seeing is that you're not really able to be a child. You have to grow up really fast, and people see you being sensitive and maybe being caring like a guy like Winston. They see that as being weak, and they'll break you apart if they want to, But for a guy like Winston, we see that he is an important part in his life. Like, he could go either way. He could go down a good path or he could go down a bad path. And it's all depending on the role models that he has. And the great thing about this film is that we see that he has two role models. He has the cop, the guy who's making sure and checking out for him. And then we also have a guy like Meek Mill, a guy who's been in the street, a guy who has made mistakes. But you can tell that this guy has a good heart. And he doesn't want to see Winston go down the same path that he went down. A guy that at the end is willing to sacrifice his own life existence in order for Winston to have a chance, to have a shot, to be able to live longer than his brother lived. And, this is exactly what I like to see in Black stories, especially in Black coming-of-age stories.
I do too. First of all, shout out to Meek Mill.
Yes.
And, I'm pretty sure this may be his acting debut. If it's not his acting debut, it's certainly his biggest role. And he is sensational in this film. And let's be fair, I don't think he's playing a character too far removed from Meek Mill in the character of Black, but he still is able to come off very natural, very authentic on the screen, right? And as far as the character goes, I'll push back a little bit. I don't think we're necessarily talking about a character who has a good heart so much as a character who has, lived in the streets, learned by the streets, and trying to pay forward those lessons, right? So I don't necessarily think it's so much of a good heart. It's also struggling with some inner demons of himself. He's got some guilt that he's reconciling with, as well, as far as the role that he played in the death of Mouse's brother, and him trying to reconcile that situation by way of his situation with Mouse. But again, that just points to the complexity of all of the characters in this film. Like you spoke to the cop, who actually is his role model that Vincent mentioned, played by Will Catlett, Detective Rivers, and he is allowed to be a fully fleshed individual in and of himself. It would have been very easily to just paint him as either the by the books cop, the cop that doesn't really get it or anything like that. But no, he's a dude who came through the streets as well and landed where he did, on this side of the law, right? And through what the powers that he does have, I don't feel like this film is trying to like demonize him in any way. I think they're trying to show him as just being another black man taking the route that life has led him and trying to reconcile what does this mean for his walk in regards to himself and in regards to the people in his life, right? And I thought that was I kind of like that interesting play on it, because for a lot of the film, you don't necessarily know his relationship with Mouse. You could easily fall into the trap of thinking that he's either Mouse's father, who's a cop, or or like the ex-boyfriend of Mouse's mother. And it's only later in the film that you realize that he was a dude who was a mentor. That program got shut down, but he took that shit seriously. So he still is doing it, and that's a message that also has to be put out there about black men. And I like the idea of putting that message in the form of a black cop, So the characters are very well drawn. It's well done.
I'll just reiterate your praise for Meek, and I really like that and the complexity of the character, in the sense that he's still evolving. Like, there's an exchange towards the end where he says to the dude who's the head of the Midnight Click now about giving the gun to Mouse. And the implication is, how can you give a gun to Mouse when he's so young? And the guy replies to him, I think I was about Mouse's age when you gave me a gun.
Mm-hmm.
So you see that Blacks is on this journey as well.
Yeah, his character in particular was an interesting redemption story to kind of watch unfold, because he's had all of the prison time, and kind of like he's had his rough times with it, and he, to an extent, like what Len was saying, like he's basically just recycling what he's been taught for a long period of time. But also at the same point, here you have a character that is also trying to basically make up and find peace with his own demons, so much so that he is willing to take the fall for Mouse after the robbery in the end actually goes wrong. And we have the tragedy of losing Swear to God, and it's such a emotional climax that is so subtle, but you see how that one gesture really impacts Mouse to where he's estranged from Lamont at the end of the film. There's a scene where he's on the way home from work, and they happen to cross paths, and so you can kind of see that they haven't seen each other in a while. Like the death of this friend really impacted them to kind of clean up their lives, and one nice gesture makes all the difference, and sometimes it is the wake-up call that you need. And Black's kind of going through that redemption process and making that sacrifice for Mouse really allowed him to kind of reverse from the path that he was starting to go down, which was, I thought, was an interesting and beautiful kind of send off for those characters.
Yeah,
I got a question though. Sure. So when Black's basically, the Meek Mill's character, he basically takes the rap. He takes the rap for this robbery gone wrong that these three young boys try to pull off, and I think he, while it's never really said, I think he gets the sense that Mouse is not the trigger man. Like, but Mouse, he definitely knows that Mouse took a part in it. So he takes the rap for it. And then when you see Detective Rivers, obviously the only working cop in Baltimore, comes to the scene, and they lead off Blacks, and then he's with Mouse puts Mouse in the car, and he says to Mouse, "Look, I'll take care of the police stuff, but you got to do what you got to do." Now, I'm curious because there's a part of me, especially because of the scene earlier in the film where Detective Rivers and Blacks have a conversation with one another. I'm not going to say it's a confrontation because it doesn't really get heated. It's just basically each of them drawing their both lines in the sand of their image of what they think they are in Mouse's life. But when he tells Mouse that I'll take care of the cop stuff, I'm led to believe, and it's very ambiguous, that means that I know that Blacks had nothing to do with this, right? But I'll do what I gotta do so that he is taken care of, meaning that either he's going to get off, get a lighter sentence, whatever, but you've got to Mouse, you got to do what you got to do to take advantage of what he's doing for you. Like I took it to mean that he knew what Blacks was doing, and he's not going to let Blacks take the full weight for this. Did anybody else get that sense, or is it just me?
I actually, now looking back on that ending, I think you opened my eyes to that, because I mean it would just be so unfair that Blacks end up taking the fall for something he just did not do. I mean, we see it in movies, we see it in films past where there's a person who takes the fall, is like, hey, I was the one who did it. But I always think about, okay, well, they're going to go through the evidence. They're going to do their investigation. Mm-hmm. I mean, a competent detective and a competent defense attorney are going to be like, hey, my guy didn't do this. And then you have a court trial, and then the guy gets off, and then you have no movie at that point, Right,
right.
So I feel like it's a little bit of plot magic. And, I'm not going to lie. It could be seen as a little bit of a criticism if you look deeply into it. But I think the symbolism is what gives it its power. It's the symbolism, it's that this guy is willing to do this,
right.
And not looking for any payback. I guess the only payback that he would be looking for is that Mouse would go and try to follow and achieve his dreams.
Right.
Or at least that's what I hope. Like when he said, I'll take care of the police stuff, I kind of hope the same thing, that he would look out for him. Because one of the more subtle moments that I like in that scene is that when Mouse has buttoned up the shirt, the buttons aren't matching up, as if he just threw it on very quickly. And there's a beat where you see the detective notice that.
Yes. Yeah. Because again, small detail, he's not a bad cop. So he would notice that, you know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, I like that little notice. Also, y'all gave props to the three young men who played Mouse, Lamont, and swear to God, best nickname ever. And also mad props to Meek Mills. I think we should also give some props to, and I'm trying to look up the actress name, Chandler Dumont, who played the girl Nikki, who was like the little photographer that Mouse is kind of like trying sweet on throughout the film. I think she gives a very natural performance in this film as well. And then also, oh God, what was his name? Help me, Vince. What is the name of the character who is now kind of like the leader of the Midnight Clique?
Oh, right. That would be. Is that Marvin Rahim, who plays Derek?
Yeah, I think
Derek is the boy that steals the bike.
I think it's Jamal.
Yeah.
Jamal. Yeah, it's Jamal, because it's Jamal and Queen. They're like the Midnight Clique that we get together.
Right, you're right.
The young boy Jamal, he's alright too. I can't find the actor's name here. Like looking real quick, I couldn't find it. But I thought that he was Pacino Braxton. Well, there's a name.
That's a name.
That's a name, dog. That is a name, Pacino Braxton. Like, dude, like Damn. But that's who played Jamal, and Lakira Dowdy played Queen. But more Jamal. I thought he was actually cool because he was appropriately menacing, but without being over the top. It was a role that definitely could have been very over the top, but he wasn't with it, except when he was riding his bike, because the boy was nice on the bike. I ain't even gonna front. He was nice on the bike. He was nice on the bike, man. When he was doing two-step on the bike, I was like, yo, man, when I was young, I wouldn't have done that. But that was fly, dog. But no, he was good. He was actually good in the film as well. I want to give all of them some props as well.
I'm so glad that you brought up Chandler DuPont's character, because she represents kind of, I feel like, the innocence of Mouse. And kind of once he starts getting involved with the Midnight Clique, there's that scene where she comes by and they're hanging out with the other girls, and she kind of like they were really rude to her and like really short. You can kind of see like that's kind of where his innocence is breaking off. And being a show that delves into mental health and that awareness is you kind of become the people that you surround yourself with. And you look at the juxtaposition between where these characters begin and where they end. They're very like innocent, very kind of goofy guys that are they just care about bikes and having a fun time during the summer, and they're just naturally the personalities of teenagers. And then you have you get involved with the Midnight Clique, and you're wanting to be older, much like you do when you're that age. You're constantly wanting adulthood because you want that freedom. And what makes the film journey so heartbreaking for Mouse is the kind of the montage of like him and like his brother and like how close they were and like how much he looked up to him, and that really influenced a lot of the decisions that I feel like he made. But the character that Chandler DuPont, Nikki, plays does represent that innocence so well. And also you can kind of see like the toxicity that can come with surrounding yourself with certain people, because in the end, like we've said, like Sword of God actually ends up having his life lost because of the influence and the decisions made.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that in the end, we've name checked him a couple of times, but I think the character of Swear to God is actually, as played in this film, is also kind of like trying to be a bit of an anchor to his childhood. I mean, he is playing like the typical kind of like, chubby, funny, slapsticky kind of like character in this film, but that is representative of the 14-year-old, acting older than he is, right? Claiming, great feats that he's read of on the back covers of albums or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that is very 14, but because of the friends that he hangs with, Lamont and Mouse, and the polar extremes that those two represent, he's kind of like an anchor to both. He's kind of probably keeping what I think all along very subtly is shown in Lamont, a bit of an anger, but it's never really, I mean, it certainly explodes when it does, but I think it's kind of subtly there, yet Swear to God keeps it on a lighter level. And whereas with Mouse, who is still trying to reconcile with the trauma of losing his brother, who we're shown, like you said, Vince, in that very effective, or I think in that very effective montage that kicks off the film, is like akin to Mouse. His brother was his best friend as well as as his idol, and he's still trying to reconcile with that drama as well. Swear to God is kind of like the one that is kind of like keeping their friendship tethered together and keeping both of them from kind of like tipping over the edge until, you know, events happen that push them both over the edge, regardless of Swear to God's influence. So, pointing that out. You know, the other thing I did mention that I hit on with watching this film, to Vince's point about how there definitely is some familiarity with this movie. I think that's true. And if you've watched any coming of age film, you'll notice the beats, you know, young boy trying to decide which way he wants to go. The chick that's maybe pulling him from the streets, but the streets keep calling, you know, the loss of somebody's going to spur him on to, you know, greater heights or whatever. You know, you see all those type of things happen, more famously in John Singleton's debut film, Boys in the Hood. But, and as powerful as Boys in the Hood is, Boys in the Hood is already 30 something years old. So every generation needs a reimagining, a revisiting of that story, especially through the time, the lens of the time of which we in. I don't think that Boys in the Hood deals with the toxicity, and I think that's a great word, of the street culture and what it produces to the degree that this film does. And I think that is that 21st century lens being brought to bear in here, which, as familiar as this story is, I think that keeps it having a fresh view and a freshness to the lessons that it's trying to impart.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Yeah, you know, you don't see any kind of glorification that's happening in this film. I mean, the scene where we see Mouse and the guys get their things to learn how to work for Chino, that was his name? No, Jamal. That's Jamal. His character's name. His nickname is Chino, yeah. But when that scene is Jamal explaining to them, hey, we're going to give you this phone, and then if we call you, you need to be here. Do you need to be there? Do you need to drop this here and then come back? And you will get paid. But then we also see that he's going to take most of the money that they make because he's the ringleader. He's the guy. Right. He's their boss. Right. And so, and these kids, they're going to get trapped in to seeing like, hey, like, you know, I got more money than probably even my mama makes. So, you know, I can give me some new clothes. I can give me some new things for my bike. I can like take these girls out and you know, have the latest gadgets and whatnot. And they get transfixed. It's like a drug. It's a lure. You know, most of the times people say about street life, like it's not about just like the money. It's about being known. It's about having that attention. Right. The status. The status. And you just don't want to leave it. Unrelated, but there's a great film, Paid in Full, with Mekhi Phifer and Wood Harris and Cameron. And Mekhi Phifer talks to Wood Harris. He's telling him, like, the one thing I love about the game is that I get treated like Magic Johnson. People see me down the street and they say, Ace, what up? They know who I am, and that feeds me. That feeds my heart. And you see with these kids, I mean, it's so easy because their minds are still developing, they could easily fall victim to this and believe that this is just the way to go. This is the way to live. This is how I have to live because there's no other opportunities around me in these streets for me to do anything. But I do like that they show Mouse. He wants to be a veterinarian. He cares about pets. We see Nikki. She wants to be a photographer. I mean, how oftentimes do we see in these African American films where in another film they would have had these kids try to be a rapper or try to be a basketball player?
Exactly.
And there's a quote from Tupac where he says, "We don't need more entertainers. You know, we need lawyers, we need doctors, we need researchers, we need people who are going to add something to the community. Like, don't let these kids just only see that." Like dribbling a basketball and like spitting a 16 bar is the only way you can make it out. There's so many more options, and I'm glad in this film they showed that these characters, they're doing things outside the norm of what is expected for a black kid in their dreams and their ambitions.
And in three ways that this becomes this generation's Boys in the Hood. One, there's commentary on Tupac, like, oh yeah, that's that name you old people like to keep throwing up around.
Right, that old guy.
That old guy, you know what I mean? Like, and I couldn't even be mad at him. I was like, yo, that's real talk, right? Two, there is, speaking of Nikki wanted to be a photographer, that it's the just real blinking you missed it scene when she does walk up with her camera and the young girl trying to be smart with her is like, what kind of camera is that? They don't even know real cameras. All they know is the button on the side of their phones right now. You know what I mean? So I dug that too. And then three, speaking to the non-glorification of the things, if you look back on Boys in the Hood, not only is some of that drug life or street life glorified, certainly not to a huge extent in Boys in the Hood as it is in some other films, but Boys in the Hood is a very violent movie and very violent. And there are scenes in this movie that are a little menacing, but there really is only one true act of violence. And because it is only that one true act, when it does come, it hits you and you're like, and it feels that much more visceral and real. But there's a scene, we mentioned the character Derek, who winds up stealing a bike from Mouse. In a lot of other directors or writers' hand, that would have been a very bloody or violent or, you know, real, like leaned into the threatening of it. And this is how it goes down in the street. Sometimes it's just somebody just kicking game, and the next thing you know, they riding with your bike, especially just punking some young boy who think he know, but he don't know. Right. And that's really all it takes. That's all it takes. And I just loved that, the way they played out that scene. That was well done. You know, I'll keep fucking going if y'all don't say shit.
I was waiting.
Let y'all know. I'll let y'all know, though. I'm gonna let y'all know.
Well, I mean, we've talked about it. You know, the core group of Mouse and Sword of God and Lamont, and to a degree, I'm curious how you guys kind of felt about this. The journey of Mouse, obviously being the main character of this film, and kind of interacting and having the mentor relationships with Blacks and Rivers. You know, then you have characters like Sword of God and Lamont. And Lamont is an interesting character, I feel like, because his trajectory throughout the course of the entire film is that he just wants to be like the Midnight Clique. Like that's his goal. That's his one existence. Like he just goes dark. The scene where they're all at the end right before they're getting ready to rob the convenience store, he's like, yo, like, you know, if we gotta, you know, put people down, we gotta put people down. And then you kind of have the goofy of, you know, Sword of God. Like, he has some of the more comical moments in the film, and I feel like both of those characters kind of are almost out of body experiences for Mouse's character, because Mouse's character is this really innocent that kind of goes back to dark only to come back to the innocence after the traumatic events of Sword of God's death. And kind of curious about how you guys felt about like the characters of Lamont and Swear to God in opposed to Mouse's.
I have to say, Swear to God really struck me as a character. I really did think that when the sacrifice came, it would be Swear to God or maybe his little girlfriend. But Swear to God, in my mind, and I think Len mentioned it, he really just represented this last bit of childhood. Like, he's reenacting anime and he's silly acting everything about him. And I thought it was really well done that after his death, even though Lamont and Mouse go in different directions, they've now grown up a little bit. I thought it was really effective that 1 year later, and it looked like the two of them had aged. Like Mouse was riding the bus. Mouse, was a little bit more poised, a little bit more put together. And Lamont, and again, I really, really enjoyed the performance of Donnell Hainsley. Like, he really depicted a character who in that past year had seen some things and who had done some things. And just his posture, the way he carried himself, the way he delivered his lines. And I think that's the way it happened. We've talked about how this film, like anything associated with Baltimore, is in the shadow of The Wire. And that is the moment, more than any moment throughout the film, that really reminded me of that brilliant fourth season of The Wire, where they showed the kids, and you see how these kids don't have the luxury to be kids. And they turn into these miniature adults, basically. And in my mind, that's what you really got with those two characters.
Yeah, and you also, like you said, the beautiful thing about that season of The Wire, one of, if not the best seasons of television ever, is that those kids start off one place. By the middle of the season, they all want something different, and they end up someplace totally different. Like by the end of that season, and Charm City Kings, by way of being a movie, doesn't have the luxury to build out a character arc to that extent as The Wire does, but in its shortened length still manages to pull that off to great effect. The one thing I will say about the Lamont character that just kept me wondering a little bit is, like I said, there definitely was an anger that I saw in the dude, but he also was a bruh who, from the beginning of the films, his hair, his locks was tight. Like his game was tight from the beginning. So which made me think, okay, there's somebody at home that is making sure that you are tight when you leave this house. So I wanted to see a little bit more of his house, only because I wanted to see, what is it there that is not translating to the streets, bro, that you was so angry, or that is making you so angry, right? Even because as angry as you are, your locks is tight, bro, all the way. And like, even at the end, when he's grown up a little bit, when he's grown up, now he's got a stylist, because he's got the fly lines going up in his, I mean, like, he is like sweet, bro. I'm like, yo, like, what is going on here? But what I also liked at the end, as detached as they were, I think there was still a sense of friendship. One, because of the things that they went through. Two, because they were still friends. Three, because I think they both, like friends do, respect each other's path. And like, that's the path you're going to walk on, dude, then I'm going to be with you. Because even still, in the middle of this film, there's a moment where the friendship looks like it breaks off a little bit. You know, one mouse is going one way and the other two boys are going a totally another way. Yet when Mouse needs help, the first ones he goes to is to his boys, and his boys, without flinching, are like, all right, so what up? Like, without flinching. It ain't even a question. It ain't even a question, dog, because everything else is bullshit. And because this is real. And sorry if y'all don't cuss in your show. I apologize.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. But to your point about Lamont and kind of like being so angry, you know, you can see that he obviously, you know, has clothes on his back, like you mentioned his locks being tight and, you know, being well groomed and stuff like that. I think that other media has taught us, and even I've had friends that have been in this type of situation, that you can be well taken care of at home but still be in a abusive situation.
Very true. Very true.
Right, that's true.
And so I think that for him as a character, that is kind of what we're seeing, is that is the fruit of him kind of being abusive, to where maybe like, you know, dad hits him, or mom is verbally abusive to him, or, you know, just a number of other things that could have incurred behind closed doors. And, you know, the streets are kind of where he's able to release a lot of that anger.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that you can tell that if he just had the right people around him, if he had the right, you know, shoulder to lean on, things could be different for him. But sadly, that's how it is. You know, there are guys who grow up, and you can tell that these guys, they can do something. You know, they just got to see a world bigger than where they grew up in. And
that's true.
And oftentimes, if they don't, and if they don't have people who are willing to show them a different way, then they're going to fall right into the rhythms and conundrums of what they see around them. And Lamont, by the end, you know, it's almost a tragic tale. I mean, it's not like that he's dead, but in a way he does die, because he ends up succumbing to being a part of the Midnight Clique. And you know, there's only two avenues, you know, for him getting down with that. He's either going to go to jail and keep being subjected to being a part of the system and become institutionalized, or he's going to end up 6 feet under, like Swear to God. And, you know, it's part of like collateral damage. It's part of like these kids, you know, they almost don't have a chance even before they realize they don't have a chance. You know, it's like you, as a kid, you grow up with that optimism. You grow up with that sensibility, that naivety. You don't really know how treacherous the world can be. You don't really know how bad your surroundings are. Like, I know for me, when I grew up, you know, in our house, you know, at one time we had an infestation of rats one time. But as a kid, you don't realize none of that. You don't realize, like, you know, the things that are going on around you. You're just in your own little world playing with your imagination. And so for these kids, seeing that they are innocent and that they need to be protected, and that, you know, some of these kids are going to have the parental figures and other kids are not. And that's just the way it is. And you almost can see and predict what's going to happen, but it doesn't have to be that way. And for me, it's great seeing that Mouse is able to have a chance and a shot of doing something better, of getting out, but it just still hurts seeing that there are going to be people who are going to be left behind.
To that, speaking of that, I just have a question. What did you think of the scene where Mouse's mom kicks him out of the house?
I think that's all she knew. Like, I think that's the only tool she had.
You know, oftentimes growing up, you know, we see that our parents, they live by a different standard. They grew up with different rules. You know, oftentimes in these households, especially black households, when you get to 17 or 18, they think you're ready to go, that it's time for you to, like, be a man or be a woman and make a life for yourself. But if our parents and our grandparents went through the same systematic inequalities and oppression, what do you think is going to happen to us? Like, there's no preparing that you could do for that. You know, it's almost you're thrown to the wolves and you're expected to come out with a sheepskin coat. And but that's not the way the world works. It's the real world.
World, yeah.
Some people are going to be able to swim, but most are going to drown. And I've never agreed with parents doing that to kids, like just kicking them out. You know, especially knowing how hard it is out here and knowing how little economic opportunities are, knowing how easy it is to get pulled in by the wrong influences. Like, you would think as parents, you want to keep your kids there. You want to keep them under your watchful eye. You want to make sure that they're ready, that they got a good head on their shoulders, that they have the right morals before they go out into this world. So seems like that kind of troubled me. I mean, I don't know. I come from a different style of like being raised and everything. So I don't know how it is in other households. But for me, my parents, they weren't the kicking out kind. They were like, hey, you can stay here as long as you want to, as long as you can pay some rent. You know, you got a job and you're not doing anything crazy.
Yeah. The only thing about that bothered me is that while Mouse is not painted as like, you know, a choir boy by any stretch of the imagination, right? When she finds Mouse's money and when she finds it, ultimately she kicks him out. You know, she finds Mouse's money. She confronts Mouse. She hits Mouse. And what we need to remember is that Mouse is probably like about 13, 14 years old at this time. She strikes Mouse and then goes to strike him again, and he stops her.
Yeah.
And I think it's at that point, coupled with the fact that Mouse is not answering her questions, so he's just being the ultimate of defiant to her, that she does kick him out the house. And while Vince, I hear you with, you know, that's all that she knew. The only reason that I push back on that a little bit is because, like I said, he's not painted as a choir boy, and there is certainly a level of defiance when the young boy like grips your hand and stops mom from striking you. But it didn't seem to me like it raised to the level yet of kicking him out of the house, right? I mean, you're caught up in the moment. So yeah, it's like, get out of my face right now, you know, whatever. But like, you gotta go type of situation. And don't get me wrong. I think she's also painted as a mother who, you know, we're led to believe if Mouse is about 14, looks like she may have had Mouse at a, let's just say, young age.
Right.
So
and his brother was older.
But yeah, and that's right. So yeah, so she probably was a very, very young mother, because there are 3 kids. She also still has a young daughter who she has to worry about. She's already working umpteen jobs just to keep the house up and running. She can't keep them in the house because she knows she can't just keep them in the house. So I mean, all of that type of stuff as a mother, it's all going through your head at the same time. I recognize that in that moment. It was just it bothered me a little bit. Ultimately, it's one of those kind of like movie things that kind of like has to happen plot wise and stuff. But that's interesting to y'all read on it. That's all.
You're good, man. But I think that's going to do it for us on this episode of Victims and Villains. Where can people find, once again, where micheaux-mission and black-tribbles?
You can find us any place and every place that you find podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google, all that stuff. Or just go to our website, black-tribbles or micheaux-mission.com, and look for us on social medias and holler at us. We love to talk to our missionaries.
Absolutely.
Well, Celeste, where can people find you and our friends over at Feel and Film?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and letterboxd.com under the name Black Dirt Magic. You can find me on Facebook under my name, Celeste Davis, and you can check out Feeling Film. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. We have an awesome Facebook discussion group. If anybody who loves films wants to come along and have a supporting community of other film lovers come through, we welcome anybody. And also, we have a website where you can check out our previous podcasts and previous written reviews of new films.
You guys can find me. I'm also on Letterboxd and Instagram at Captain Nostalgia. You guys can find us everywhere you guys get your podcasts from. Also Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Patreon. And you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net to find past episodes that we have done, links to all of our social medias, Patreon, and most importantly, our mental health resource library. So until next time, remember to stay sweet.